Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value-creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a Soka researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy the conversation.
Hello, hi, I'm Bryan Penprase. I'm a Vice President for External Academic Relations and Sponsored Research here at Soka University of America. I also teach astronomy. That's my regular academic home. And I also do research on global universities and how they are being started all over the world, and especially global liberal arts, which is a subject near and dear to my heart. So nice to talk with you.
Likewise, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast, Brian. And the fact that you work at Soka University of America, I'm a graduate. Like it's really awesome to connect with that network and yeah, to speak about the different experiences that we've had and how we're still contributing to the overall mission of that university. But I'm also very interested to know like what brought you to that university and brought you to the work that you're currently doing, since you cover the gamut of looking at astronomy and like kind of researching different universities, liberal arts. And I know that you've also lived in different parts of the world and you are connected to so many different institutions and individuals who are doing great work. And so, yeah, this is a really exciting moment to kind of rewind the clock and understand a little bit more about what different paths you took and how they converged to where you are right now. So thank you.
Yeah,
And
wow.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's a long conversation, but I guess we have a few minutes here. I'll give you like the 3 minute version and you can ask questions. So I started out just as a regular astronomer, which made me something of a global citizen in that I was looking at the Earth as a little planet suspended in the vastness of outer space and connecting our planet by way of my research to the vast surroundings that are all around us in the Milky Way and so forth. So right away, that cosmic perspective got me thinking about how we as a species share this tiny little home, which Carl Sagan calls a pale blue dot. And when you see it from outer space, you really realize how precious and how fragile it is. So in the course of doing astronomy research, I found myself traveling all over the place because the astronomers had the good sense to place their telescopes in beautiful places all around the world that happen to have good beaches and clear weather. So I found myself going to Chile, to Australia, to places in Europe doing research. And in the process, met up with all these different astronomers from all over the world and realized what it's like to be part of a global community that is caring passionately about a subject, and how all the differences of culture and language just dissolve in the face of this common interest. And I realized how exciting it was to get to know people from these places. And so soon my network expanded out. I had some research collaborations with people in India, in Taiwan, in Thailand. I got involved at my little college, Pomona College, in helping set up a new college in Singapore called Yale NUS College. So I left Claremont with our family and a bunch of suitcases, and we flew off to Singapore for several years and helped launch this new college. And while I was there, I spent lots of time traveling around to India and other countries nearby, studying how new institutions were being built throughout Asia and learning from them and helping connect with them, and found a similar community of global people interested in liberal arts, interested in new ways to educate students. And that got me very excited about the global type of liberal arts that we were building in our little college in Singapore. So when I found out about Soka University of America, I was very excited to come back to California. And I saw in this campus an amazing global community of students and an amazing curriculum. So it was a very exciting opportunity to be here and to be able to carry on that kind of very international, very globally focused kind of liberal arts here in California.
wow, that was Beautifully said, and it might actually have been exactly 3 minutes. So true to your word. Well
Okay.
done. And yeah, I love that, you started off by speaking to your first research passion, right? That being
Mm,
in astronomy,
yeah.
and the fact that, it's really this cosmic perspective that allowed you to understand what's happening on our planet,
Hmm.
and how precious that this planet of ours is, but that this notion of interconnectedness, I mean,
Yeah.
you understand it, very deeply, and that not just from like a theoretical perspective, but these travels of yours going to different parts of the world where the skies are clear, it's beautiful, there's a telescope, but being able to connect with other fellow researchers to learn about what they're doing, but also you're a part of that culture, like immersed within, and trying to make sense of like kind of what new discoveries are out there, this shared purpose. I find that very, very compelling as far
Hmm.
as what it means to be a global citizen. But um, but I'm curious, like, what drew you to astronomy in the first place? Was there any particular influence that got you interested, or a really clear sky, and you said, "Wow, I want to learn more about that." But what's the origin story for you
Hmm.
and your interest in astronomy?
Sure. Well, I have a theory about that too, which I think is another one of the universals that we all share. In fact, I think it's something built into our being as human beings to respond to the skies. And that was actually the theory of my first book that I wrote, which I'm going to shamelessly show here on the screen, Power of Stars, which is it has a subtitle of how civilizations were shaped by the sky. And what I was teaching when I was doing my work at Pomona College was a class called Multicultural Cosmology. And in that course, I recognized that every civilization, every culture around the world has this innate response of awe, of wonder, of excitement when they see a dark night sky. And that drew me in as it draws others in. But because I was a person who loved science, I applied that interest in ways that were more quantitative and analytical and tried to really get into the very mysteries of how all of this happened, how our universe was started, how the earth was formed, how all of these stars and galaxies arose out of this singularity 13.7 billion years ago. The story was so mysterious that I just had to learn more and had to find out, is it true? What else can we know? How can we prove this? And what are some of the things that we don't know about it? So I was just caught by the plot, if you will, of this incredible story of our universe and wanted to learn more about how everyone came to be, how we all share our origin from the Big Bang and all of our atoms and molecules from the early universe and from stars. So for me, it was, as Carl Sagan says, it's a way of coming home because we're actually in some ways finding ourselves when we study the universe.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Given the theory that you just shared about, and I'll definitely have to check out the book later, because there is this notion of like awe that we have when it comes to um, a dark midnight, right? But
Yeah.
a dark midnight sky. But I also think about it in terms of just nature more broadly speaking, right? When you're in nature, you see a beautiful waterfall, you see a forest, you see something that just, deep down resonates or puts you at ease, or it creates that sense of home, or just, yeah, I think that there's something about that connection, that draw that we have. But I guess I was curious to know if there was like a particular moment when you were growing up, maybe
Yeah,
like a camping trip,
I
or it
see.
was a particular location, at a particular age where you were like you had that initial moment of like awe or shock that like this is something that I want to pursue and now study in college.
Well, it wasn't a simple sort of A to B kind of story. There's a lot of bumps and turns and unexpected serendipitous things along the way. But early on, I was a incredible science geek when I was like 10 years old. And I was one of those kids who'd run around memorizing all the Latin names of every species of mollusk and I could rattle off all the genus and phyla and species. I had a shell collection, and we were just fanatic about cataloging and collecting shells of all things because we had a marine biology class in fifth grade that just it blew my mind. And so I got really excited about marine biology. And then from there, I got involved in just science. Like every science I could figure and learn, I would soak up. And so I just loved science. And then in high school, I had a chance to do research in neurophysiology at the City of Hope here in Southern California. And so that was an exciting experience. And I got involved in doing experiments with what were called cholinergic synapses, which are important in learning about how humans, when they age, maintain neuroplasticity. And we were able to adjust the transmission of these little neurons. That got me really excited about laboratory science. I got involved in the what was then called the Westinghouse Science Talent Search. I went to Washington, got to meet other very geeky and nerdish kids, and I realized I was not alone. And I'm very passionate actually about helping kids early in their lives who have science as a passion because it's generally not supported by peer groups. It's generally seen as vaguely antisocial and unusual. And so it's so important to encourage kids like that to feel comfortable in fully expressing those interests. And then from my neurophysiology, I got involved in physics in my senior year of high school. I got really excited about physics. So when I went to college, I was going to be a physics major because that seemed to have all the really powerful mysteries of all the forces of the universe. That seemed really exciting. And so I wanted to get to the bottom of that because the idea that all of our objects, all the planets orbiting the sun, everything in our house is all held by gravity, all of our atoms by electricity. I found that unifying basis for physics to be so exciting, to recognize the whole universe is obeying these four force laws and everything that happens can be explained. So that got me into physics. And then as I was moving along in physics, I realized that the great mysteries in physics were all pointing toward astrophysics. At that time, they had discovered dark matter, and I was just amazed and excited by all of these mysterious particles that they haven't discovered yet. I wanted to help find them. So I spent a lot of time in a basement trying to work with very complicated cryogenic experiments. And I learned from that I don't want to work in basements. So then I became an astronomer because we don't work in basements, we go up to mountaintops. And that was also kind of an accident, but I was very happy that I got into astronomy because it's just a great honor, privilege, and joy to teach when you're out there under the stars with students. They get excited and you introduce them to the stars. And what I just told my lab class just this week, I said, if you're not trained properly, you can step outside, look up at the sky, and just see a bunch of dots. And you're missing out on what soon, I told them in the lab class, all of these dots will soon become your friends. You'll know them. They'll have names. They'll have stories. And every time you go outside, you can greet them. And they'll be there for the rest of your life, as they have been for all of your ancestors. And it's just a beautiful thing to be able to help students get to know that when they walk outside. So, yeah, so I love teaching astronomy. And I started teaching when I was undergraduate and teaching physics. And then when I was out at graduate school, I gave lots of tours of our little observatory in Wisconsin, the Yerkes Observatory, and I gave planetarium shows at Adler Planetarium in Chicago, and just loved all of that. So that made me realize I wanted to teach. So when I got out of my graduate work, I aimed for liberal arts college for my home, and that's how I got to Pomona College, where I taught for about 20 years before coming out here. So that's the basic, very logical path that got me into astronomy. I think he wanted me to say, oh, I had a telescope when I was 10 and did this and that. It wasn't like that at all. It was just a random set of bumps and wiggles that ended up in a very improbable place. But it's also taught me to really enjoy and value and treasure improbability as a driving principle of life. Sometimes the most improbable thing in your life is the most magical and interesting one. And sometimes the most probable and most likely and most risk averse path is the least interesting one. And I think too many people in lives, they go for probable, they go for safe. And I think it's good just to follow where things take you and really follow those passions and interests that you have and listen when you have these questions that you need to answer because it's a great animating force in life to have that.
Wow, that very beautifully said. Especially towards the end, that really, struck a chord with me because I feel like I'm at this point in my life where
Uh,
I'm, thinking about what I want to do, what I should be doing, where I should be at, and kind of in this mindset of strategically thinking of like what's the next step. It's kind of based off of this very probable, like, oh, this is my likelihood. I'll go in this direction, and this is where I'm trying to get to. But um, the way with which you spoke about your interest, this relationship that you have with just science, broadly speaking, there's such passion and like authenticity baked into every single venture that you threw yourself into. And there's this feeling of like, you went to maybe what was like the next improbable step, but it took a lot of like courage and being quite bold to say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to commit myself to this basement and learn as much as I can. And only until after you've done it, you realized actually I'm gonna just do a hard pivot and go to the exact opposite, which is
yeah,
actually being outside in
yeah,
the open air. And
no,
yeah,
that's
and I
really
think
true. And I think I'd like to think of that as a general principle that you want to experiment, but you also want to know and think about how the experiment's going, and to not be afraid to pivot, as you're saying, and but do hard things. Don't be afraid to. I wouldn't say I failed at these things, but I found myself not perfectly suited to doing terrible things to rats at City of Hope. I knew I didn't want to work in biology from my neurophysiology experience. But I enjoyed it. I learned all kinds of things, but I realized that wasn't quite it. And then the low temperature physics experience in the basement, that was cool too, but not quite there yet. So it took me a few at bats before I found the thing that really worked, and that was the astronomy and that was the last place I expected to go. I thought I'd stay in physics because that somehow seemed harder and more glamorous. But I really, really loved the astronomy, and I'm really grateful that I got bumped into that orbit in my path.
yeah, but I don't think it's a coincidence that, all of these different, let's say, trials, right? Different tests that you did, it exposed you and immersed you within so many different disciplines within the sciences, right? Because you'd mentioned about, marine biology, right, like way back, in the beginning, but then there was like physics and there was, like this kind of like, just you were just absorbing so much. And and then, I kind of want to jump now to, just a handful of years ago, you had arrived at, well, not you had been at SUA, I think
Yeah,
from
I got here
2016,
2017. Yeah.
2017, and then I wanted to ask about the life sciences concentration because this was a big venture
Hmm.
that the university was trying to add a new concentration to their liberal arts program.
Yeah.
And to my understanding, you played a really big role in helping develop that curriculum, amongst
Yeah.
many other things. And
Hmm.
so part of me is thinking, well, because you're so well-rounded and expert in many different areas, of course, astronomy being the major one, I feel like that prepared you quite well to take on such a task, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's something that yeah, it was a lot of fun, very exciting, and I was involved in starting a new college from scratch. So I spent 5 years working on this new liberal arts college in Singapore. So in that, we designed a science curriculum, we hired faculty, we built an entire campus out of what used to be a golf course, and we watched it rise up around us in 2 years, and soon we had 20-story high towers filled with students. And I was able to stay there until the first graduation happened, and it was amazing. So coming here was similarly exciting because we had what at the time was a hole in the ground next to Gandhi, the Gandhi statue, and and now I'm sitting in what is now Curie Hall, and it's filled with amazing, talented science faculty, life sciences faculty, and incredible dedicated students in lab coats doing experiments just down the hall. And we have biotechnology companies in our building. And yeah, we built this program here in just the span of a few years. And we had a great team. You know, the faculty here had been thinking about it for many years. And so when I showed up, there was already kind of a blueprint that was ready, but we had to think more about how to integrate some of the disciplines in more creative ways, make more interdisciplinary courses to kind of create a major that would fit within the unique educational system here at Soka University of America. So that meant being efficient with the classes so that there weren't so many of them, like in traditional science programs where you have to stack 12 or 14 classes. We had to design very carefully with the minimum number of classes to get students to a place where they could qualify for medical fields of different sorts, either medical school or other kinds of health professions. And we also want to build in sort of a cutting edge sort of project-based learning approach where the students in the first semester were doing research problems. So to do that, I organized a science advisory board that included some of the top people from Stanford, from the Claremont colleges. We had a couple of medical doctors involved to help us think about medical education. And we had a series of these science symposia to have community involved too in these discussions. So we went out to the Athenaeum. We had these wonderful presentations from our board. The group of students and faculty that were there asked great questions. And then we holed up in a room with the group of experts for many, many hours and came up with the blueprint of the life sciences curriculum and then a hiring plan too, which we then implemented and hired a bunch of really amazing faculty. So that's kind of the story of what we did from 2017 till about 2020. That's when I was dean of faculty here.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing more about just kind of what all happened, how it played out. I mean, the way you just spoke about it, it just sounds like it was completely seamless and everything was like perfect. And I'm sure that, you know, with the experience that you brought from having started this private liberal arts college in Singapore in collaboration with Yale, really helped a tremendous amount.
Mhm.
But you know, you're no stranger to pioneering efforts. Always things unexpectedly come up, and you have to pivot and address those. But
Yeah,
it's yeah, it's amazing that now it's more or less kind of set, right?
yeah,
And now you're seeing graduates from
mhm,
the concentration and
yeah,
looking at them go in, like apply and then go into medical
yeah.
schools. Would you
Mhm.
say that there's already been one graduating class already, or has it
I
already been
think so.
two?
Yeah, yeah. I was on sabbatical last year, so I don't have all the data about where they're going, but I do see all the research posters in the hall, and we're actually having a research fair tomorrow. So
Awesome.
every year there's more students doing research and presenting results, and it's exciting. So yeah, I think this all the signs are good. We have a really nice group of students and faculty, and yeah, it seems to be running really well. And, you know, that's a tribute to the university too, because they came up with the resources that were needed. And not many places could pull something like this off, where they had everything they needed to build this beautiful Curie Hall that I'm sitting in, to hire the faculty to do all this and to pull it off seamlessly without any kind of difficulties in terms of the financial pressures, and it was wonderful. So yeah, it's been really great. Very exciting chapter to be a part of, and adds a really nice new dimension to the Soka University of America curriculum and to the community to really engage and to advance the mission, right? Because that was something we were also very mindful of when we were building this, is the ways in which this type of expertise could benefit humanity and could uh, implement the mission in any number of ways as students go off to a variety of countries, helping as public health professionals or as different people in medical systems, and being aware of not just from the medical side, but the larger life sciences side of how the many ways that science affect people's lives, and to be able to be in leadership positions in those areas. So our students now have that capacity to really engage deeply in science and to really affect change in life sciences. And there's so many different areas where that's changing our lives, both medical and synthetic biology and other types of applications of biology. So it's an exciting time, really. And so it's great that we're able to be part of it.
And this new Curry Hall and the life sciences concentration, none of this existed when I was a student back in
Mm.
2011,
Uh-huh.
and so it's just so wonderful as as an alum to see this growth and development, and like you said, right, all of this serves the purpose of furthering the mission of Soka University of America, which is to foster a steady stream of global citizens committed to living a contributive life. And I'm my next question is tied to the mission. I know that a lot of the work that you've done, and the research that you did, you had this way of speaking about this cosmic view, like understanding our place in the world and the universe, and I'm sure that this idea of a global citizen had come up in your mind well before you set foot on this campus at Soka University. So I'm curious, like when you first learned about Soka, what was your understanding of the mission, and has it in any way changed, or has it shifted in any meaningful way, like to like not all the work that you've done and like kind of your I don't know what I'm trying to ask. Any thoughts about the mission statement
Mm.
before and now,
Yeah.
currently?
Well, it is actually exciting to be at a place that has a mission and has values that you can describe, and that people know and are aligned with and care about. And I found that exciting and refreshing because I had taught for 20 years at Pomona College, which is a fine institution. But if you're trying to figure out what its mission is, it's almost impossible to describe, because it's like, yeah, we do everything here and we try to do it as well as we can. And we're kind of like Stanford, but smaller. So that's our mission. And that's not very inspiring. And so here, have an actual mission, to foster a steady stream of global citizens committed to living a contributive life. That's awesome. And I think there's so much power in having a mission that you can articulate, both for an institution and for a person. And so I think it's really refreshing and good, especially in these times when people need values, they need direction, they need some purpose. And so to have something that you can point to and say, yeah, that's our mission and these are our values is great. It provides a unifying force to bring coherence to what otherwise would be just a collection of academics running around teaching a collection of courses. So this gives it that unifying framework that I think is very exciting. And this is something when we were designing our Yale and US College in Singapore, we had a problem in that we similarly, like Pomona, we're trying to build the best little college we could. But the mission, what was our mission? Well, we're trying to teach really well. We're trying to have great courses. Our students will go on to graduate school. Again, that's not really, it doesn't position you uniquely in the world. So the mission, our official mission at Yale and US College was a community of learning built by two great universities in Asia for the world. And it was actually written as a haiku by our president at the time, who was an English professor. And it's cool. And it has a global sentiment in it. So that's all good. But when I found out about this place, I had actually stumbled, and I think everything in life is that I found most interesting are all improbable. So when I was training to do the Singapore college, we were doing this like cross-sectional research, and I was just sort of looking up liberal arts colleges in the US because we were scanning to see what other types of liberal arts there was in the US. And one of my charges was to find about internationalization in liberal arts. So I stumbled on this place called Soka University of America. This was back in 2012. And I said, and I looked at the statistics. Soka University of America, it's in Southern California. And I'd been living just up the road for all this time. I didn't know about it. And what has 45% international students? And I was comparing it to all the other ones that were like 5%, 7%. And at that time, places like Pomona were debating whether to go up to 10 or 12%. And SoCa was up there at 45%. And I was just blown away by that. And then I visited the campus just out of curiosity, and the architecture was stunning. And I sort of filed that, in my mind, and then went off to Singapore. And when the job here came up, I had basically those two pieces of information. I'd visited the campus. I knew it was very international. But then when I heard that they're building a new science program, and then when I got to know this mission and that it had also those values, courage, compassion, wisdom, I got really excited about it because, like I was saying before, it did provide that rationale, that unifying framework, which a lot of higher education just doesn't have. It generally tends to be, yeah, we're here, do whatever you want. And it's kind of like a lot of higher ed, I think, causes students to be a bit bewildered. There's a grab bag of classes they have to pick. They'll graduate and get a job somewhere, but they often really need more help in figuring out who they are and what their purpose is. So I think it's great that Soka has that. And it's been a really exciting thing. When I was dean, I really enjoyed pitching Soka University of America, and I still do that now. And when I was on sabbatical, I would always give them my little 5 minute, pep talk about Soka University of America to everyone I would bump into because they would all want to know about it. So yeah, it's fun. And one of the little snippets I always find myself saying is that with our international student body, every classroom contains kind of a cross section of the world. So in real time, you're having a global dialogue in every class, it's been amazing teaching in that environment. Like in my astronomy class, just as an example, I routinely have students identify days of the week in their different languages. So I just hand out markers, have all the students walk up to the board, and in a typical class at Soka, which has 16 students, I can usually find 8 or 9 different languages, and we chart all the different day names in all these different languages. And amazingly, they all map to planets. Sun and moon, of course, Sunday, Monday, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, think about Martes and Miercules and so forth. You've got Mars, you've got Mercury, and so it works out that each of the day names in all these different cultures, with a few exceptions, point to planets. And that's just one example of how the global nature of our students is a lot of fun. And I try to also draw out whatever sort of constellation stories and things they might have from their own experience. And that's a lot of fun too.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I'm not surprised since, I experienced that when I was
Hmm.
a student, and I really valued how the mission, like you said, is this like unifying force because it informs not just what the curriculum is, supposed to be, but also a lot of the interactions that happen on campus and these kind of like higher lofty aspirations of like, well, how are we getting closer to a more harmonious world, right? A more peaceful
Hmm.
world, and that's as big as it gets. And this mission is not just something that is shared amongst those who are physically on the campus, but I think those who graduate and leave, go out into the world,
Hmm.
it becomes that kind of compass that they carry with themselves. And I,
Yeah.
again, saying that from my own personal experience,
Hmm.
where I really ask myself these questions of like, yeah, what does it mean to be a global citizen? But also, like, am I leading a contributive life in the work that
Hmm.
I'm doing? Do I find it fulfilling? Do I have this altruistic flame
Hmm.
that is still set ablaze? And how can I, yeah, help those who are in need? So I find Yeah, a lot of what you said was really amazing. And I used to be an admissions counselor at SOCA, and so
Oh, wow.
your whole pitch and everything is it's just spot
Yeah.
on, and
Yeah.
I'm in awe. And yeah, and SOCA is very lucky to have you, Brian. So thank you so much
Oh,
for all of
thanks.
the work
It's
that
very
you've
kind.
done and continue to do, because it ultimately boils down to the students. And so the fact that you're able to get to such a granular level, as far as what the students are like, what is the makeup of the students, and then also yeah, probably their individual stories, the cultural context that they come from. All of those details are, I think, are really important, and you're able to spot them and value them because of how small that environment is.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think that's probably an attraction of the liberal arts, and that they're able to bring together such diversity, not just in the students, but also in the curriculum, in the environment. And I wanted to give some time to hear more about the global liberal arts, because this is a really big passion of yours. And I know you've written books, and feel free to, do
Oh,
another
you plug
shameless
another book.
plug. But
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about like that current research that
Okay.
you're doing.
Yeah, well, that's the other book here. This is my book, The New Global Universities, which I co-authored with a friend, Noah Pickus. And while I was helping start this college in Singapore, he was starting one in China. And then while I was working with universities in India, trying to advise them on liberal arts, he was working with all kinds of programs in China and other parts of East Asia. So together, we started studying how liberal arts would translate into different, not just languages, but different cultures, and to see this amazing phenomenon actually where across Asia and across the world there's this enthusiasm and excitement about liberal arts, which in the US we kind of take for granted as something that we vaguely attribute to Ivy League schools and small colleges, but don't really quite know what the point, why liberal arts, because it's sort of the default setting of too many places. And so because it's been a default for so long, in a lot of cases people lose sight of its power. And so I became sort of doubly excited about liberal arts from seeing it being reinterpreted in all of these other cultures. And I guess in the same way the skies can be interpreted by different cultures, so can liberal arts. And in the same way that skies have meaning to people that they project onto it, so does liberal arts. And so in some cases, like we looked at Ashoka University in India and some of the other Indian universities, these were amazing sort of rays of light within the in the education system in India, which has something like 25 million college-age students who urgently need higher education, and a system that was designed largely by the British as a mechanism for their colonial training. And so the Indian education system inherited a very specialized kind of more sort of technical kind of education, and when they had a chance to develop liberal arts education, they were just thrilled. And so the Ashoka University and some of these other institutions were attracting the best students all over the country and just generating a lot of excitement because it gave students choice. They could come in, find out who they were, find out their interests, and then pivot based on that into new directions. And so that's something we take for granted and think of as typical in higher education, but it's a brand new thing throughout a lot of countries. And so that was very exciting to a lot of people in India, in China, and other countries. So I got really excited by that and got to recognize that a lot of what we think of as liberal arts is kind of a universal way of bringing students into recognition of who they are at its core, and recognizing who they are not in a solitary way, but by being part of a community of peers where they can trade ideas with each other, they can test theories of truth against each other, and they can share their hopes and aspirations with each other. So the idea of a residential community of diverse and international students engaging in deep questions with each other in a freewheeling, unfettered, creative way. That's exciting. And I think that just liberates so much intellectual power in students. And so, I sent both my kids to liberal arts schools. I was definitely converted, and they both did great. They both went to a little school in Minnesota called Carleton College, and I'm now completely converted. I'm 100% on the side of liberal arts, even though, my own college experience was at a larger research university. So, I mean, a liberal arts research university. But when I came to Pomona, I was surprised at how small it was, and even more so at SoCA. And at first, if you come from a big university, that seems like a bug. But after you really recognize how powerful it is, you realize it's a feature. That is, the small community really means that everyone has to know each other, has to work out with each other any sort of differences, and gets to know. They can't be anonymous. They get to know each other. The faculty get to know them. So that smallness, I think, is very a powerful part of SoCA.
Yeah, it really gets to this idea of the world in miniature, right? And we definitely see that explicitly in the case of Soka University, given the fact that the student body is nearly half, international,
Yeah,
and yeah, and I think going back to this idea of like the global liberal arts, I think it's fascinating how you've been able to not just research and study on the expanding interest and enthusiasm of liberal arts as an idea within different regions of the world, but you've been able to go there and talk with
yeah,
these researchers and see these schools that are being
yeah,
built and ask these kinds of questions. So the scale of it, I think, is very akin to the word global. But then when you speak about liberal arts, there's a certain depth that speaks to like the more human qualities and harkens back to your talk about the wonder and awe of what does it mean to be a human, in this world, and to ask these questions not just in a vacuum, right, but in communion with your peers, because who really
yeah.
has all the answers, right? I mean, you would think, oh, it has to be the universities, right? They're these citadels of knowledge, and yet really who are we kidding? Like, do we
Yeah.
have all the answers? I mean, I don't think that that's the take home or the takeaway that we want students to have.
Well,
And yeah.
just to
Mhm.
give a few examples, because in the book we study in depth new liberal arts programs in Abu Dhabi, in India, and outside of New Delhi, in Vietnam, in Ghana, and of course our Singapore project. And it was so exciting to see all of these little schools and in their early years, because we were interviewing their founders, and in many cases we visited, and you recognize that convergence of talent and aspiration that happens when you build a new university, where anything seems possible. And so I think by embodying that sense of creativity and co-creation, these newer universities especially have an incredible energy. And I think that's something SOCA still has because we're such a youthful institution. And I think there's a lot that gives to the students to be part of a younger place where they're in many ways building the university. And especially if it's a smaller place, you can have that kind of impact on the institution. So I found that really exciting to see how in each country there was kind of a different spin on the liberal arts. So like in Africa, there was really a definite emphasis for Ashesi University, which we studied, on ethical and entrepreneurial leaders to create a renaissance of Africa. That's kind of their mission. And so they're very much about fostering the sense of ownership among the students for their own honor code, for their own campus, and they really take that to heart. And they have like a 4 level leadership and ethics curriculum that they built. And then you have the one in Abu Dhabi we looked at was NYU Abu Dhabi. There you have an even more international student body than SOCA. There's about 110 nations represented and everywhere possible. And so it's just so amazing how diverse their student body is. and they've done wonders there in bringing liberal arts to the Middle East, and they've become kind of a hub of talent for what they call the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa. And I could keep going, but since from those examples, I've traveled across India. We've had several liberal arts in India conferences and seen this wave of interest in liberal arts in India take root. And now there's a constellation of about maybe 10 different liberal arts colleges in India that are doing great. And I've been working with liberal arts schools in Bangladesh. There's one called Asian University for Women. I'm on their board. And then I've also been talking with people in Pakistan at this really amazing place called Habib University, which is reinterpreting liberal arts in through the lens of the sensibilities of Islamic culture, which is really exciting. It's a secular form of Islamic culture that it interprets liberal arts through what they call yoshin. And yoshin is a notion of what you might call grace. And this is a kind of grace that is one that's an interpersonal grace where you understand and care for each other. So that's what we would call the compassion part of our values. And then also the idea of grace in that your mind is kind of liberated to think in new ways. So it's an intellectual grace that you can express in any number of the arts. And so they integrate arts, like visual arts, performing arts, music into the curriculum. And it's just a very beautiful thing to see this kind of flowering of different types of liberal arts around the world because it's a way, the way I like to think of it, it's a way in many cases for these cultures to reinterpret themselves and to express themselves through the vehicle of education and through the process of bringing their own younger generation in contact with their own cultural legacy. And that, as opposed to the kind of vocational education that was the only option prior to these schools, where students were just being forced in to become cogs in a larger machine to train, just as engineers and just step into some industrial firm of some kind. Now they're being trained to think for themselves and to take on leadership roles of different kinds. It's very exciting.
Yeah, the way you articulate it, it sounds like, these universities, they're on the cusp of something really, really big, and
Mm.
it's pushing a larger kind of movement. And I think this is in part the thesis of your book, that they're so important in kind of pointing a new direction, and new possibilities
Yeah,
for how the overall system of higher education can be, benefiting not just one country, but the whole world, right?
mhm,
The scope
yeah.
of it changed.
Well,
And
you make communities of communities. And one
yes.
of the people we talked to, John Sexton, he talks about universities as a sacred space for dialogue that creates
Mhm.
community. And then if you have communities of communities, they ripple out through the world and they change the world. And so even if a community is small, the fact that they are connected to others and through their graduates and through their each of the graduates moving out, these ripples, I think will have a big impact on the world.
Yes, no, I have no doubt. And then this flowering of liberal arts, I don't see it stopping anytime soon. And yeah, and I kind of wanted to start, you know, well, this has just been so much fun. Like I really enjoyed listening to your thoughts about global citizenship and also this incredible journey, this improbable journey, like you said, of kind of going all around the world, understanding, the skies and the universe, and like kind of ultimately finding yourself back at home, in a way, right, in Southern
Yeah,
California, and
yeah,
yet still global, right? And the work that you're doing all via, your office, and also the travels that you've done. So it's just incredible to hear about, your story. And it sounds kind of like, you're very hopeful for the future. And I wanted to give you the last word as we kind of sign off about any final thoughts that you have in regards to, a kind of a more hopeful note on like where these global, liberal arts are headed, especially in the context of our quite tumultuous times.
yeah. No, I mean it is. You can easily get depressed if you're reading the news. There's a lot of depressing things out there, and I think the solution to all these problems are ones that will ripple, that will come from individuals, that will ripple outwards from individual actions, individual people who are kind to others, who are mindful of their communities, and who practice, those values, the courage, compassion, wisdom type values. And I have a lot of hope that we don't notice a lot of the goodness around us. We tend to only report on evil. And to use an astronomical analogy, 90 something percent of the universe is dark matter and dark energy. It's this unseen, mysterious thing. And I think in kind of a similar way, what really matters in the world are these ordinary acts of kindness that everyone has every day and don't get reported. They don't make headlines, but 99.9% of people are just trying to live good lives and take care of their loved ones. And so when I think of it in those terms, I think of all these families in every country just taking care of each other. And we have all of that in common. And there, there, when you think in those terms, all of these fault lines that are causing all these conflicts just seem so completely unnecessary and so futile. And I guess ultimately you have to believe that the truth will prevail, that the whatever brings us together, it's much more profound and much deeper than what divides us, I think will in the end win the day. So yeah, I'm very hopeful about that, just rooted in our common humanity, which we can always count on as a unifier and as a source of hope and inspiration.